Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we're taking a look at the recently announced and revealed X-Plane 12 coming, I don't know when, but it was announced at Flight Sim Expo. We got a bit of a insight into what it's going to involve, what they've changed and what will be upgraded for this new version of X-Plane. Obviously, for those of you who didn't use X-Plane 11, that's where this channel started. And it's a fantastic simulator with lots of great features and lots of great add-on aircraft as well. So it's exciting to see what X-Plane 12 will bring to the table and then where that will go in the future. So today we're going to run through the keynote video that X-Plane themselves gave. This is all property of X-Plane, all the clips I'm showing, or I'm not actually going to show clips, we'll just look at some screenshots and I'll just give my little perspective on it. If you haven't already seen the video from X-Plane themselves, I highly recommend you watch it. The link will be in the description and on the video. Yeah, you must watch that first really, because I'm going to talk all over it and give you just some of my thoughts on what we're going to see arriving. But we'll go through most sections and talk about what we can expect to see in this new X-Plane. So let's get started. First of all, they kicked off the keynote rather unusually with a look at a new aeroplane in the fleet. X-Plane obviously comes with some default aircraft, and now they have decided to expand that, and we saw the F14 first. This gave me a bit of a chuckle. The F14 is a plane I have not really used in any simulator until this year, and now this will be the third one that I've been getting a go at. So it's great to see. It's a fantastic airplane, of course. They gave us a few shots from the outside. Some interesting afterburner effects have been added in, and we got a look at the virtual cockpit. It does look very nice actually. So I was quite pleased with the images they showed. They also showed us a HUD which looks like it's slightly collimated, which means that it will appear to be moving properly as your head moves around, so you can't see it when you're not looking through the HUD. So that's quite a nice little detail, and I'm sure a little bit of technical wizardry had to go into making that work. It does appear to be a slightly more modern style HUD than the F14 that we know and love in DCS, but yeah, it's nice to see a new airplane arrive, no doubt. Next up, we got a look at X-Plane 12's weather data collection. So this isn't the visual system, this is how it generates the weather in the game when you click real world weather. So the old one used to just download lots of METARs and then sort of produce static points around the airports and add that weather there, but it didn't look into the future, as Austin said very clearly in his video. Very nice explanation, I thought. So it doesn't look into the future and it's static to specific points. Now they have an algorithm that will actually look around all the different data points around the whole world and generate accurate or realistic weather for what is probably going on in those areas, even where they don't have actual collection, and therefore it can also forecast into the future. So that is great news and will provide a bit more of a dynamic world. I actually quite liked, I had no issue with X-Plane 12's weather. It always seemed relatively realistic to me, but I can see that for the perfectionists out there, this is going to be a bit more accurate. And Austin talked about how he has a program he's written for real world flying that he uses that uses a similar system. It gathers a lot of data over the whole world, where you've divided the world into a grid and then you get all this information. So really interesting to see. And then we got some fantastic colors on the screen as Austin finished up that presentation on how they're going to have a whole new data collection. So looking like it'll be more realistic and more dynamic around the whole world instead of relying on static points, just a few airports. It's an interesting idea, and I'll be curious to try it out. I'm looking forward to it. How much we'll notice in-game compared to X-Plane 11, I don't really know. That's why I'm curious to see, because I, as I said, had no real trouble with the X-Plane 11 system, although it could be a little bit unreliable at times and didn't update very often. So I know a lot of you did actually use third-party weather programs, so maybe this will correct the need for that, and it will be yeah, a little bit more reliable. Next up is the exciting one, the big one. It is the clouds and weather visual system. This is something that we've seen get surpassed from X-Plane 11 in other simulators. So X-Plane 12 is obviously hoping to catch up or maybe surpass that again. So we are looking forward to seeing what they've got in store. So it was explained nicely by Ben here about how the cloud system used to just be 2D sort of billboards. So as he described them, so they were sort of flat images that would then move around as you got closer to them. And now they're going to have volumetric clouds. Finally, that's really what we all wanted to see, and it's going to make a big difference, I'm sure. So really excited for that. And there'll be something called ray marching through the clouds. Not entirely sure what that meant, but they look a lot better already in these screenshots you can see on the screen now. I was very, very happy to see that effect, and it also is going to have a big impact on lighting, because the GPU now will be rendering that separately, which is looking like a whole better system over what we had. Now, I always used default X-Plane 11 clouds. I never actually upgraded them using any add-on. And it was interesting, a lot of people often ask me what upgrade did I use or what mod did I use. So I must admit the X-Plane 11 clouds, for what they were not terrible, but they certainly don't have the same pizzazz as, for example, Microsoft Flight Simulator's more recent, or Clouds, or Digital Combat Simulator, who've also done a similar thing recently. So this has been a thing that needed to be addressed to keep X-Plane certainly in the visual side of things, unless they wanted to go hardcore, just procedural simulator sort of route. And it's again really nice to see, and I think they've done a great job. I was very impressed with the screenshots I did see during the presentation. So excited for that. Another thing that it's going to provide is a softer transition, they say, a softer transition from IFR to VFR and vice versa. So when you enter clouds now, instead of it going from, oh, I can see, and then you hit a cloud billboard, as it were, and you're suddenly in grey when they just fill the screen with grey, now there'll be a soft transition because you're actually flying through a volumetric cloud. So as you can see on this screenshot, you're going to have a nicer effect out the window as you sort of bobble in and out of the clouds. And that makes a big difference. It's a huge part of flying, especially commercial flying or instrument flying. It's just so hand in hand with that sort of flying. It's transitioning in and out of cloud, the way the clouds slope sometimes or provide strange sort of distortions or images out the window, and having to rely on your instruments. So to go from just having a grey screen to actually having that effect is really nice. And obviously one of the best feelings in aviation is when you climb out on a grey day and you transition from sitting in murky cloud and you zoom out on top at hundreds of miles an hour into the sunshine. It's a feeling that you just can't replicate. It's the best part of the day job pretty much, and yeah, now they're hopefully going to have that arrive. Like I say, we've seen it in other simulators, but great to have it in X-Plane. Another interesting addition is the new rain effects, including puddles now on the apron. So this screenshot was really quite good, I thought. And apparently the scenery developers will be able to assign where the weather or the rain puddles sit and that sort of thing. So yeah, looking like a much improved system for especially the ground, because the ground effects were not always that amazing with the adverse weather in X-Plane. So they've made a big step up there with the rain on the ground. But that brings me to the next topic, which I'm even more excited about, which is the windshield rain effects. So why am I so excited about this? Well, the windshield rain effects in various simulators have been okay, some better than others, some worse than others, but they've always been sort of slightly put to the wayside, I've always thought, especially in the later simulators we're getting. When you look at other video games, and in particular sort of Dirt Rally style games, and you've also got Ace Combat even. I know those are arcade games and they don't have to focus on generating flight models and so on, but they have amazing water effects on the windscreens, and it's been slightly lacking from certain simulators, and like I say, no more than X-Plane 11, and it's great to see them add a really impressive one into X-Plane 12. This one is one of the best I've seen, from what we've seen anyway in the demonstration. We'll definitely need to try it out, and I'll be looking forward to trying it out in different weather conditions. But as you can see here, it has particles on the window that were reacting to the wiper. I mean, absolutely brilliant. I know we've had effects that look like that, but it seemed to be like they actually were. Now, if that's true or not, I don't know, but it's something we're going to need to get our hands on it and try it out outside of a sort of keynote format. I want to put it in on the ground, stationary. I want to blow the wind all over the airplane and see if we can make the rain move as we would expect. But very exciting from what they said, and I was really impressed with the images they showed. They also showed prop wash having an effect on it. So that's where, as you rev up the propeller engine, let's say you have a propeller on the front of your aeroplane, as you spool that up, obviously it's going to blast the rain off the windscreen before you're even moving, as if you're moving through the air already. But me being an airline pilot, obviously I was very excited about these screenshots they showed in their 330, where as you accelerate down the runway, you first have the rain going down, then it reverses, the wiper moving it out of the way the whole time, and then the rain building up around the wiper area. All very good. Something they said as well, which I was really interested in, was that they said they have blanking modelled. So that's where if you've got rain hitting, let's say in this picture the rain's coming from the left side, then it would only hit the left window, and there'll be a lot less on the right hand window until you start moving through the air and generating your own sort of wind, as it were. This is a particularly noticeable effect. It's quite common when taxiing to have only one pilot needing to use their wiper. So the Airbus, luckily, you can select one wiper only. But yeah, it's quite often that if you see a plane taxiing with only one wiper going, it could be that only that side is getting the rain. So I'm excited to see how this affects it. That sounds very trivial, but it makes a huge difference to your flying, especially on the takeoff roll or the landing, obviously. We don't use the wipers at higher speeds than that. We don't notice the rain so much. When you're going at 250 knots, it doesn't really matter. It all sort of trickles away off the windscreen. But at these low speed areas, particularly taxiing around the ground and, as I said, takeoff and landing, it can make a huge difference. And there's often a pause at around, you're coming in at sort of 500 feet. There's a decision to be made by the pilots. Do I need to use the wipers or not? And the visibility could really, really impact you. So it's obviously you can't move your hand up there to adjust the wipers if you're busy trying to land the airplane, so you have to ask the other pilot to do it. So we try and settle that all in before landing, but sometimes you'll think it's going to be okay, and then you have to turn them on. You'd think we could just put the wipers on straight away and just forget about them, but we can't. The dry windscreen is not very nice for the wiper to be moving over, so we don't want to use it if it's not wet enough. So if it's just a few spits of rain, then we'll try to avoid it. It's also very noisy and distracting. So yeah, so wipers are actually quite a big decision-making process in flying, and they always seem to come at the most inconvenient moments, takeoff and landing. So it'll be really nice to see some serious effects going into that, and I was very impressed with what I saw. It almost feels more like a simulation of the rain. It even includes the rain refracting the light. So that's amazing. Yeah, more of a simulation and less of just an effect to just paint onto the windscreen. Now it seems like an actual part of the simulator. Really, really excited. Next up, we have another addition to the X-Plane default fleet, it seems, which is the Airbus A330. So finally, we have an Airbus in the default X-Plane. They've avoided it so far, and yeah, it was about time. It's going to be the A330, which is great. We don't have too many A330s out and about, although there was one made for X-Plane 11. I don't actually have it, but yeah, it looks like they've done a great job. I mean, the copy looked really quite nice, very, very good, up to X-Plane standards for sure. And in particular, it sounded like they've worked quite hard on the systems. So from the description we were given, it's going to include normal law, alpha protection as a result of that, and the autothrust modes, flex, MCT, toga, all of that good stuff. Now, how far that goes, we don't know yet. Would it go into alternate law, direct law? I'd be surprised, but I don't know yet. So we'll have to get our hands on it and try it out. But what is nice is it sounds like it's got, if normal law is sorted, then that's a great starting place. People can jump in and start experiencing the Airbus in its true form straight away, and then they, failures and things is obviously a huge addition on that later on. We've also got some nice simulations of the hydraulics. They're very proud of their hydraulic system, which seems to extend for the whole of X-Plane 12 now, where the different flight control surfaces can be attached to specific hydraulic systems. As you can see here, only one part of the aileron moving and so on if there's been a failure, and certain roll spoilers moving. So yeah, nice to see. Again, that's sort of what you'd expect, especially for more complex add-on aircraft. So on this channel, a lot of you are probably used to that being the norm, but it's good to see it included, especially in a default airplane. And a feature I didn't know existed on the 330, which was great, always great to learn something, was this the rotating of the main gear, where the rear tyre pushes down as the aircraft gets into the air to sort of get it in position for tucking away, and also giving a bit of tail clearance on takeoff. So yeah, that was a nice little explanation, and always great to learn something new, and a good sign of the level of detail they're taking into their 330. But again, we're going to need to wait to get our hands on it to really get a sense of it. But I'm not expecting a full fidelity simulation. I don't know why we should. It's not the intention of these aircraft. But very impressive. Also had the systems displays working, including having the correct system display page at the correct stage of the flight. So we all know that there's been default Airbus aircraft that haven't included many systems, especially that sort of level. So that was nice to see. They also said that it's going to have ECAM. So ECAM is our system for dealing with a lot of the failures in the aircraft. It gives us a sort of electronic checklist to follow through. And yeah, it's going to have ECAM for engine fire, or, and I'm quoting them here, any sort of failure. Now, how true that will be it'll be up to us to try it out in the simulator. But very exciting. If it's got a full suite of ECAM failures in it, that would be really quite impressive. As I said earlier, I was wondering if it was going to have the other sort of law, so alternate law, direct law, and if it's going to have all the failures, then it would need those probably. But again, we'll have to wait and see what exactly the ECAM instructions are and how in depth they go. But still, great to have an ECAM functioning of some variety, no doubt. Next up, we have some ambient sounds which have been added in. Now, this is a nice to have feature. It doesn't really pique my interest too much personally, but it's very nice. It'll be particularly good for people who do general aviation flying, particularly bush flying, that sort of thing, where you can hear road, trees moving and rustling in the wind. You've also got sort of I think I can hear a few wild animals and so on. Again, in their keynote, you should watch it. You'll get the actual sound effects. Not something I noticed flying. I've never heard anything outside the cockpit while I've actually been moving over in the air in an airliner. But again, for smaller aircraft flying, maybe for those general aviation small little airfields which are near roads and things, it will add a nice little bit of ambience while you're setting up the aeroplane. So I can see the advantage, especially, like I say, for the general aviation. They've also got improved wind effects. So we've now got the trees you can see here going from low wind, and it's a bit quieter. And then if you have high winds, you can actually hear it rustling through the trees, and they move with the wind. Amazing little piece of detail that was quite impressive. Again, In airliner flying, I've never noticed the trees moving even when it's really windy, because lo and behold, you'll be so busy concentrating on the flying. But nice to have. And if you're sitting there in your PA28 with the door open, setting it up, and there's trees nearby in your local airfield, you can bet you'll be hearing that and maybe thinking twice about whether you want to go flying. So that's nice to have, but more exciting was the airport sound effects, which they are going to add in. Now, this is another of those features which is hard not to think, well, it's about time, but can't complain of it arriving anyway. So we've got the airport sounds now for vehicles being applied to different vehicles, and also changing depending on what work they're doing. So really good to have. Airports are noisy places, lots and lots of vehicles moving and lots of motion. That's sort of how they work. So yeah, really good to have. In particular, that's going to be applicable to the tug, because you can actually hear the tugs in real aircraft. Even the full motion simulators that we train on as pilots, they'll actually include sound effects for the tug, because you can often hear it, the older style ones revving up as they're underneath you. One of the few things you can actually hear from the flight deck. Most ambient sounds at an airport, by the time you're on the aircraft, you won't really be able to hear, because it's such a noisy place with the air conditioning, ventilation, the avionics, cooling, and so on. But yeah, the tug sometimes is so noisy. So I hope we can get a bit of that simulated, mainly on the older tugs. I'm talking obviously a lot of places have moved on to more electric or efficient ones nowadays. We also heard some nice sound effects from catering trucks, things like that. Again, all add noise. So in their little demo they showed, when the door was open you could hear it, and then when it closed it all muffled. That was really nice. So yeah, these sounds are there, you do hear them. There is lots of noise going on the aircraft during a turnaround, no doubt about it. They did show a little noise effect for a jet bridge being removed and attached. I'm not sure where they recorded that one. It didn't quite appeal to me. I haven't heard that. It was a big siren sort of going. It sounded more like a fire bell to me. So if I heard that while I was sat on the flight deck, I'd probably be a little bit more anxious than normal. So yeah, but maybe in certain parts of the world that is a normal sort of sound effect. So yeah, nice to have and great additions. Particularly, I'm looking forward to the tug and the more operational side of that and how that's going to impact. But I think for those of you who like to do a full turnaround and have the vehicle service the aircraft properly, and now we have moving jet bridges, it's going to really add up to quite a nice simulation of a turnaround and the sort of ambience of being at an international airport. Next up is another big topic for X-Plane, seasons. Seasons have arrived. They've added them, which is just great. So here you can see spring, and then we'll transition into fall. So they've got the new forest engine, which generates these much better forests that even move in the wind, as we talked about. And also now we can have seasons, which is definitely something that's been needed in X-Plane, and it's going to make a big difference to our experience of the simulator, because it always looked exactly the same otherwise, which was often talked about. I remember when I started the channel as well. So really happy to see that, and they've gone to quite a good extent to figure out where the season should start and end and so on. So yeah, good stuff. Really pleased to see the seasons arrive. Again, something we need to really get our hands on to try out and see whether it adds up into a big effect. But I think it will. Making approaches in the winter is a lot different, view out the front of the windows into a lot of airports over the middle of summer. Next, looking at some scenery improvements, we've got some new tower options to help people build more realistic airports for their local airports. Now, X-Plane has always had an amazing thing, which is the scenery gateway, where people can construct their local airport with the correct taxiways and put the buildings in the right place. They weren't obviously up to the payware standard, but what it meant was when you got hold of X-Plane and you wanted to fly to an airport, it was nearly always there, and I was always impressed when I flew live streams around, and I still am when I fly them around still in X-Plane, when you arrive somewhere and the taxiway markings are correct and the stands are in the right place. And this is because people kindly put in their own time and effort to make it correct, and this is a great powerful feature. So to give those creators more tools to make those airports even better, it's just a fantastic thing. You can see the tower example they provided looking very much like the Edinburgh Tower. But yeah, so really happy to see that, and there was a whole host of different towers shown. So nice addition to a really strong feature, strong asset of X-Plane. That scenery gateway always impressed me a lot. Another addition to the scenery has been their inclusion of some sports equipment and fields, and particularly stadiums. Now that might sound a little bit trivial, but actually stadiums are a very big visual feature. They are one of the most obvious things when you fly around, in particular at night. So I'm going to be really interested to see how that plays out at night in X-Plane 12. So stadiums are lit up very brightly often. So when you fly into certain towns, especially in countries that like their football, but even anywhere, the stadiums are often the first thing you'll notice, like I say, especially at night. So X-Plane has very good night lighting, X-Plane 11 certainly, and I'm hoping, of course, that 12 improves on that. But I really hope that these stadiums at night are lit really brightly, because they do stand out so much. It's amazing actually how bright they are, and they're one of the most obvious features from the sky. They're usually brighter than the airports by quite some margin. So yeah, I was excited to see stadiums and this sort of thing added. It's something that really does need to be there. They are a feature of even airliner flying. You will see those. They have also added ports for the towns that have them. So yeah, large seaports are now going to be in the simulator, which is great. I personally don't particularly notice them everywhere, but then it depends where you fly. There'll be some airports around the world, I'm sure, where ports are a huge feature. So yeah, good to have those added. Again, really should have been there, and it's great to see them finally arrive. The shipping, though, that is a big difference. I'm excited to see that, because that makes a huge difference. You can always see the larger boats and the wake from boats as you fly over busy sort of parts of the world. So I'm hoping that really shows through in X-Plane 12. Again, going to need to get our hands on it to really get a taste of how much that impacts it. Something you'll notice on the screen in front of you now is that change in the scenery. If you look at the ground, you can see where the photo scenery on the right side of the screen ends, and we move to default X-Plane 11 scenery. So you can see where the improvements are needed, especially, seasons is going to make a big difference here, because the fields in X-Plane have always been exactly the same color as you fly around. So functional, but not as ideal, and the simulators always look better sort of IFR. So I'm hoping that with this new forest engine and the new seasons, we might see the texturing and so on just ease into something a little bit more realistic. I know a lot of you will be using your own custom scenery or your ortho scenery anyway, but still there are a lot of people who will use the default. So I'm hoping we'll see an improvement to this base texture. Not something we saw much of in this particular keynote though, so I'm hoping they've got something to share with us at some point about this sort of this blanket texture we're seeing right now, because it's fine, but yeah, it would be nice to see an improvement at this stage. Next up, and we're getting towards the end here, they showed off some new water effects. So 3D water, which is really quite nice. So larger waves in the ocean, smaller waves in rivers and lakes, and that could make some really interesting flying conditions. So that is something I quite enjoy, flying on the water. Pleased to see that. Really nice water effects and an improvement. A particular highlight for me was this, which is that the colour of the water now will adjust as to where you are in the world. The X-Plane will know what colour the water should be. I always actually changed my water default colour in X-Plane 11. I changed it to a sort of more tropical colour just because I liked it. I thought it looked a bit more vibrant, especially flying around sort of the mid-latitudes a bit more. But it was nice to see that now this will be included and change around the world. So that'll add a bit more of a dynamic to where you're flying. And it will. I think that will have quite a big impact. The water always looks very pretty from the air. They also now have the option to have two sets of controls linked into one version of X-Plane, so that you could make if you're building a cockpit at home, you can have two yokes and so on. So for the serious cockpit builders out there, I'm sure that will be a useful feature. The final thing they talked about was an upgrade to the Inbuilt ATC with some new user interface, which looked all very nice, I must say, but I'm going to have to confess here, I basically I don't think I've ever used, in fact, the default X-Plane 11 ATC, or if I have, not for very long. That's not to say it's no good at all, I just don't really use it. I'll be using VATSIM, but you can see here they've changed the user interface. You can now tune the different frequencies in the ATC box. You can pop it out, so you can have it on a separate monitor, and you can use it in VR. They've also added a push-to-talk option, so you can assign a button on your HOTAS, you press that, and then you can select the option and then release it, and it's going to work in VR as well. So definitely some nice usability upgrades for people who do use the default ATC. As I said, I'll be using VATSIM most likely on my channel, but there we go. It's also going to have some region awareness, so that you'll get different voices from where you are in the world. That's a feature that is being used in Better Pushback, which is a mod for X-Plane 11. A really nice mod which includes different audio effects as you're in different parts of the world, so different accents and so on. So really nice to see that come to ATC. That is a really nice touch, but again, I'm probably not going to see much of it with the way I use the simulator. So that's it really. So my overall thoughts for the X-Plane 12 keynote we've seen so far, whether there were some nice improvements coming. It looks like they are definitely working on the X-Plane 11 framework, so we're not going to see a whole new simulator from the ground up, and I don't see any problem with that. We already know the X-Plane it has a very nice flight model and the ability to produce some amazing quality payware add-ons, so I'm quite happy with that side of things, and this is sort of seem to be focused obviously on the visual and graphical upgrades as well as some of the audio upgrades, which you can imagine would be the case in order to sort of keep up with the competition, I suppose. But yeah, some nice changes. Like I said, I want to see some more of the sort of the ground scenery improvements. See if we can get some more examples of flying over sort of different parts of the world to see what the terrain looks like from above. But to have new aircraft added in, that's quite nice, especially the 330. Going back to that rain effect on the windshield, that really did pique my interest. I was quite impressed with that one. And these volumetric clouds, as you can see here, the clouds on X-Plane 11, fine. I really like that they cast shadows, but if we can have volumetric clouds that you know, the light adapts through and so on, yeah, really exciting. So that should be some good stuff. We'll see how this new weather system plays out. As ever, do please watch the actual X-Plane announcement. That's going to give you the best source of information. I apologize if anything in this video is wrong. It's not intended to be. I'm just trying to give you the bits that I picked up on. I haven't picked up on everything in the video either. There's lots more information in the actual keynote. This is just to give you some of my thoughts on it and some of the features that I was getting particularly interested in from what we've seen so far. I'm sure there'll be lots more news to come, so do please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more, as well as plenty of Airbus guides and live streams coming up soon. That's all for today then, so we'll see you again in another video or live stream. Do please keep safe and well. Bye bye.